world. Ooh, then where you come from? Yes, it is not. Yeah, here's a chance to make it. Yeah, if we focus on our goals, you can dish it, you can take. Yeah, just remember that you've been told. It's a different world. It's a different world. Hey, then where you come from? Ooh, then where you come from?
Good evening, and welcome once again to We Rise podcast. I'm T. Willard, your host, and sorry we're running a little late, but you know how it is on these things called Tuesday after a giant school board meeting and the first day back to school. Last evening, we had a school board meeting that was supposed to address the whole issue of parental engagement. And I really couldn't wait to hear what was going to be the proposals designed to engage parents throughout the fourth largest school district. But more importantly, what new ways had we come up with to engage the parents from the Rewise village? So eagerly, I would get ready to listen. 3 hours of parental engagement, the most important piece of the lesson plan of back to school in 2022, I believe that we could be presenting to the public. It was a colossal mess. It was a high level of disappointment. Uh, Anybody who would want to grade that fiasco last evening would have to give it an F with 5 pluses. First of all, they didn't talk about parental engagement. And secondly, when they talked about it, they talked about it as if the engagement formula was universal. That how you engaged parents in Hialeah was the same way that you would engage parents in South Miami, and how you engage parents in South Miami was the same way that you would engage parents in Miami Gardens. Take so. And until we understand that we are a school system that is very diverse in its cultural and ethnic makeup, then we will clearly understand that how we engage the parents has to be designed to fit those cultural nuances if we want to have effective engagement. But I guess we didn't want that. I guess we just simply wanted to be on record of having had a public conversation about engagement. Well, let me tell you, we're not going to stop there. So I want you to do this for me. Every second Saturday, starting September the 10th, we're going to have our own engagement conversation every second Saturday at Mount Calvary Baptist Church, located at 1140 Northwest 62nd Street. From 10 to 2, I'm going to be leading a conversation with concerned parents, concerned individuals who want to be actively, aggressively engaged with making sure that what happens to the 13 schools in the village is uniquely designed to make sure that the educational outcomes are somewhat towards being equal. So put on your calendar the second Saturday in every month from 10 to 2 at Mount Calvary Baptist Church at 1160 Northwest 62nd Street. Come out, bring anybody who is concerned about the future of the children in the 13 schools. You don't have to have children in the schools. You don't even have to live in the village. You simply have to be concerned about the educational outcomes in the village. Bring the children. and call 305-696-4450 and let me know that you're coming and if you're bringing children so that we can have activities planned for the children while they're there with you. If we are going to turn this system around, if we're going to make the formula for continuous achievement to our advantage as we talk about the process, then we've got to take advantage of an opportunity that we're presenting to you to sit down and have an adult discussion about what we are going to do coming out of this pandemic. I suggest to you that if you thought things were bad 2 to 3 years ago, they are worse. If you thought we had bad teachers in our village, then we're going to have even more teachers who fit that quote unquote dictionary description. If you thought the gap between those in Liberty City and those on South Beach and those in Coral Gables was very, very broad, it's now a deep gully. Trust me, if you thought that we were catching up, we're not going to catch up. We're further behind. All of the data reveals that before the pandemic, we were behind. Coming out of the pandemic, everybody is behind, which means that we are further behind. Going towards a solution means that a solution cannot be uniform. A solution cannot be the same for all of the schools in the district. It means then that those who are in the policy-making positions have to be brave enough and care enough to make those decisions that the formula, the recipe for catching up, for going forward, has to be different. I don't know why we don't want to face up to that reality. I don't know why we keep pretending that everything is the same for everybody. It was not the same for everybody going in. It would not be the same for everybody getting out. And when we say that we are concerned about going forward, then we ought to demonstrate that we are concerned. We didn't do that last night. We simply saw some pontificating and posturing by the school board members. Those who were running praised themselves for all of the great work that they had done in spite of the pandemic. They celebrated the fact that we are an A district and that our teachers have been outstanding, and therefore everything coming out of the pandemic ain't what it ought to be, but it could be worse. And since they were in charge going forward, it's going to be all right. I didn't expect anything else from those persons who were making those kinds of statements. But as usual, I did expect something different from those two persons who represent the majority of the schools that children who look like me go to. I didn't see it. Not surprised, because to do what had to be done, to say what had to be said, would require ruffling some feathers, would require not being on the team. So I was not surprised. And since I was not surprised, I did not get as depressed as I thought I would get. But I was sort of disappointed because I said, this is the opportunity. You now can say what you should have said before the pandemic, but now you can say it and have the pandemic covering you. They can say that they're upset, they're angry. I know this is not their character, but because of the pandemic, I understand this newfound frustration and anger, and I can give it back to where it came from, not from them, but it came from what they went through because of the pandemic. And therefore, if they talk about things differently, I can understand that. That didn't happen. One school board member spent most of the time demonstrating that they had full command of Robert's Rules of Order. And they wanted to make sure that the chairperson, as she made her decisions as chairperson of the board, that the Robert's Rules of Order were followed to the T. And that as they interrupt her, they wanted to make sure that she was not offended by this, but simply that they were pointing out to her that this is the way that it should be done. And then my school board member who represents my village, it was time for her to make her comments. And I said, we got it. I know that now she's going to seize upon the moment to lift up some real pertinent issues. She now can say without anybody thinking that she is out of order, that fellow colleagues, because of the pandemic, I am really concerned about the fact that the plan for going forward has to be unique, different. I was really concerned about the fact that I'm fully aware of the fact, fellow colleagues, that there will be many new teachers in the district. But I'm hoping to have a conversation with the superintendent to talk about the new profile of hiring teachers in my 13 schools as we come out of the pandemic. I was hoping that she would say to the school board members and to the superintendent and to those witnessing that engagement in my district must take on a new formula. That in order for us to maximize what we need to maximize as it comes from parental involvement, we've got to expand the coefficient definition of what we mean by parents. So I'm hoping that we would say engagement of adults who are concerned about the educational outcomes of the children who live in my village, that many of my children are not raised by biological parents, but they're raised by grandparents, and they're raised by bigger sisters, and they're raised by aunts and cousins. And therefore, when we talk about engagement in my district, we cannot talk about parental engagement, but we must talk about engagement of adults who are concerned about the future of children as they come through my district. I was hoping that she would go through that kind of in-depth cultural analysis of the impact psychologically and physiologically of the children in her district. But she let me down. She took her time to inform us that since the last school board meeting, she had attended several affairs in the community, all of which were of a social nature, all of which, in my judgment, without sufficient information, appeared to be campaign appearances, none of which had anything to do with education achievement, the impact of the pandemic on education, the impact of teachers on the positioning on the educational delivery process coming out of the pandemic. She spent her time telling me and others about what a wonderful time she's had attending events in her district. I was not disappointed. I was shamed. Maybe I take this stuff too personally. Maybe I'm too concerned about the Makayas and the Damians and others, the children that I met in the district. And maybe it's because I know that the decisions that are made by those adults who are in charge are some of the most important decisions that are going to be made that will shape their lives and the lives of their children. So when I see people who look like me, who are responsible for part of what the quality of their future looks like, use or misuse the forum of authority and influence that they have selfishly, I really get disturbed. And I just think that as we talk about election time, that we once again simply participate in the process because they say it's election time. And we allow people who are elected not to selfishly articulate our interests and the interests of the future of our children. And when they don't do it, we simply say that, well, you know how it is, you know how they is, you know, you can't control them. I just think that we ought to be sick and tired of being sick and tired of allowing those individuals who profess to be concerned about us, who come to us and say, send me and I will make change on our behalf. That when they don't do it, we feel that we are obligated not to treat them as if they are, quote unquote, not being our friends. So as I talk about my school board members, people say, well, you shouldn't do that. They're nice people. They are nice people. I'm not talking about the niceness of the personality. I'm talking about their selfishness as they act out their roles and responsibilities. I don't expect them to just be black going in. I expect them to be black coming out and while they're in. I expect them to be unapologetic pro the future of the children in my community. I don't expect them to use their time and their influence on behalf of promoting themselves. I expect them to take all risks that are necessary in order to move the agenda that, quote unquote, defines and designs the future of black children. So when I talk about school members, I talk about all school members, but my school members are those school members who represent my community. And if folks don't like that position, that's their problem. They can't fire me. They can't run me out of town. I'm not renting. I own. I'm my own, quote unquote, master. This side of heaven, I'm guided by what is right, unselfishly. And I'm concerned about the continuous behavior of those who are elected to serve us and their refusal to do so, and our apparent satisfaction with them not doing it. I'm adamant about the importance and the influence of the political process. I know that in this democracy, it is not whether or not you vote, it is whether or not you're prepared to vote in your own selfish interests, not being manipulated by others to sustain their interests, but only to make sure that your interest gets lifted up. I got this hat on tonight. Y'all know I love hats and caps and stuff, and all my stuff. I try to make a little signature. But I thought this hat sort of remind me of a lot of things that are important. Got a lot of badges on here. One of them says, Shirley Chisholm for president. Shirley Chisholm, those who have been active in the political process know that Shirley Chisholm was the first black lady to run for the president of the United States. Says Jeb Bush, 02. But Jeb Bush was the governor of the state of Florida. I worked in his campaign years ago, the first time, and the second time that he ran. Jeb Bush, great man. County Commission, punch 238, Betty Ferguson. Everybody remembers Betty Ferguson and how many times she ran and finally got elected at the county commission. Betty Ferguson, punch 238. Janet Reno, Janet Reno. She was running for state attorney, and she and I had a little head-to-head about push out the pushers in Liberty City. But I stated my position. She said that she was not going to join our campaign to push out the pushers, that she had met with Mrs. Range and Georgia Jones Ayers, and they told her that she ought not get involved in our community. And I told her that if she didn't get involved, I was going to run against her. And we became the best friends. And then there's a good one here. It says, vote for fair. Alternative for Miami mayor, November the 2nd. Whoa, I did run for Miami mayor. Didn't win. had a good chance of winning, but I couldn't carry the black community. Can you imagine running for mayor of the city of Miami? And the biggest problem I had was getting black folks to vote for me. I'm the same guy. But I never will forget that Willie Sims, the late Willie Sims, was being interviewed by Michael Putney of Channel 10. And Michael Putney said, T. Willard Fair is running for the mayor against Mayor Steve Clark. And are you supporting him? And Willie Sims, as only a black preacher could do, read back and said, let me be very clear to you, Mr. Putney, that if T. Willard Fair was running for dog catcher, I'd run against him. If not, I'd vote for the dog catcher. I said, whoa, what a position. Henry Herman Cain, President 2012. T. Willard Fair, the Wilmington 10, Ben Chavis and the Wilmington 10 flew all over the country raising money for the Wilmington 10, got money raised, got them out of jail way back then. Point is that I've always recognized the importance of the power of the vote. And my hat demonstrates that mine is not just for the elections in 2022. Mine is for the elections ever since I can remember being able to vote. So I know the power of the vote. I demonstrated all over the South to get the right to vote. I marched. I risked my life in places like Alabama and Mississippi because we deserve the right to vote. And in 1993, when we finally got the voters' right legislation passed, I was there when it was signed into law. So I know that many, if not most of our problems, as they are related to being resolved and solved, rest with the political process. And that's why we should take voter registration and voter participation seriously. That's why we should not allow anybody, black, white, or polka dot, to simply manipulate us in their own self-interest. That's why coming out of this pandemic, we have got to be aggressive with those who are already elected. We've got to send the message that we're going to be very selective about who goes to represent us. And we got to also send the message that if you do not live up to what you say you are going to do, that convince us to vote for you, we will not support you. Why do we think that it is sacrilegious if a person is black and does not do what he or she is supposed to do for us? But if a person is white and does not do what he or she is supposed to do for us, we call them racist. Oh, them Cubans are taking over. Oh, here come those Haitians. But when people who look like us, who grew up with us, who went to Northwestern with us, don't live up to our expectations, somehow we are able to conveniently excuse them. Selfishly, we sacrifice the moment of being liked for the quality of the future of the children that we're concerned about. I'm not going to allow that to continue on my watch. I will speak out against it, loud and clear. And if you don't like it, that's your problem. That's your problem. But I'm saying to those who do like it, who feel the same kind of frustration and the dormant anger that I feel as we enter into this new election cycle, that we are going to voice our collective opinions. Not talking about demonstrating, not talking about rioting, not talking about calling people names, simply talking about sitting down, having an adult conversation about what needs to happen, designing a program and a process to make it happen, understanding that we take no prisoners, that it does not matter if you're Missionary Baptist or Holy Roller, it does not matter if you're Delta or AKA, Does not matter if you're Alpha or Omega. It does matter if you're selfish and not concerned about the children in the village. And that we're going to meet, as I said, every second Saturday in the months coming forward, starting September 10th at Mount Calvary Baptist Church on 11th and 62nd Street Northwest, to talk about A, what is the problem? A, what are the problems? B, how many problems can we take on at one time? C, who is responsible for their solution? What is the role that we must act out in order to get the kind of solution that we want, not what they say we can have? Because don't we know that power is not given, power is taken? Don't we know that this democracy would not be in existence if a group of folks had not decided to leave and come to America? Don't we know that power, if not used effectively, will be used destructively by those who are in power? So don't we know that all the problems that we have may not have their genesis in, quote unquote, the voter process, but they have, quote unquote, their termination in the determination of the manipulation selfishly of the electoral process. So I'm starting with those officials who look like me. I expect more selfishly out of the 4 county commissioners who look like me. I expect them to be unabatedly pro us. That's not an unphantom expectation. If you live in my neighborhood, I expect you to be concerned about what's going on in my neighborhood. If you say that you are Black and that we voted for you because you live in a Black precinct, then no one is going to be surprised, upset that you are unabatedly pro those things that affect your precinct. And as we deal with the whole issue of race, no one is never going to be surprised that I'm unabatedly pro-Black. It does not mean that I'm, quote unquote, selfish or discriminatory as it relates to other groups, but it certainly means that it's only human. And with keeping it with the mission of my organization, that I'm going to be what I have to be in order to be effective to me and to, quote unquote, the mission of my organization. So I expect those commissioners who look like me to be unabatedly pro me. And trust me, their colleagues won't be surprised because they're unabatedly pro their demographic makeup, their constituency. I don't expect them to be anything differently. And when they are, I don't say, well, oh, they're being prejudiced. No, they're not being prejudiced. They're being what they're supposed to be based on the expectations of those who sent them. So maybe what's going on in my village is that those who represent us don't know what we want. Therefore, since they don't know what we want, we cannot criticize them for the things that they don't do in relationship to what we want. So we've got to tell them publicly what we want. And then we've got to make sure that they give us how they're going to give us what we want. And if they don't give us and tell us how they're going to give us what we want, and they don't get what we want, then we have to sit down and decide whether or not we should continue to allow you to represent our wants. It's personal. We're talking about the future of children yet unborn. We're talking about coming out of one of the worst periods since the ending of slavery. We're talking about coming out of the pandemic. We're talking about a system that is in disarray. Let's start at the top. We're talking about a system that's the fourth largest system in the world, where the chief executive officer has already said, I'm leaving in 2 years. What's the plan? Who's next up? That conversation needs to be going on now, not 3 years from now. But he's been very adamant about the fact, I'm leaving in 2 years. And this should not be a selection process that was conducted the way the past selection process was conducted. And this should not be a selection process that is conducted with a decision already having been made. We're talking about filling the superintendent's vacancy in the next 2 years. We're talking about a district that will, for all intents and purposes, be in vast disarray 2 years from now, based on what I know about the system, based on what I've seen in terms of the reorganization, based on what I have seen in terms of the new problems that have been created by the pandemic, based on what I have seen as it relates to the attitude about education and education achievement in the village itself. It says to me that a leadership vacuum for any period of time in the fourth largest school district is unacceptable. So we should be making that decision now, not 6 months before he leaves, but he's already said, I'm leaving in 2 years. So who's in training right now, so that we don't miss a beat 2 years from now? Also, in these 2 years, what's going to happen? Parent engagement is one of the issues that we are going to talk about when we have our meetings every second Saturday. But a larger issue for us to talk about is teacher vacancies. Nationally, 222,000 teachers have left the profession. I don't know what the number is in my district. I'm trying to get somebody to tell me how many teachers have left the profession. I thought yesterday, when UTD got up to make its presentation, that it would talk about the awesome new demands that are going to be placed on teachers who decided to stay and fight the next war. But the UTD representatives talk about the fact that we have not completed negotiations on our new contract, that we need to talk about increasing teacher salaries. Well, you can teach and teach and teach, and you can increase and increase and increase. But if the pool of those who are teaching keeps shrinking and shrinking, then they can make all of the money designed for 200 people because there will only be 50 people. So as we talk about increasing teacher salaries, we better figure out a way to fill teacher vacancies. That needs to be at the top of the continuum of things that have to be done as we go forward. So what is going to be the real teacher vacancy the next couple of years? And what is the plan to make sure that it does not disproportionately impact on those underserved, non-performing schools that were in that category of being underserved or non-performing before the pandemic, that is now still at the top of the list of all of the schools who are underperforming and underserved. And the thing about it is that the problem is not identical. For the first time, those who have power have problems in their schools. And because of their own personal involvement to make sure that their quality of life does not diminish, they will not be focused on my quality of life unless those who sit in the seats who look like me and the community that's going to meet with me reminds them that we've got to prioritize what we do first coming out of the pandemic. Because if we don't force our conditions to the top of the discussion, then those who have the power and now for the first time have a problem would not be concerned about making any allowances that are not selfishly in their best interest. So the climate has shifted. Folks who normally never had a problem have some problem. And folks who had all of the problem before the new problem got more of the problem than anybody else. And since some of the folks have some of the problem for the first time, one has to make a very convincing, demanding argument about who gets solved first and the most. Unless there's a groundswell from the community demanding selfishly that I was in the mess before the pandemic. Now we're all in the mess. But this is your first time in the mess, and I'm in the mess more than anybody has ever been in the mess. And therefore, as we come out of the mess, I want to be first coming out of the mess. In order to make that argument, those who are in positions of influence and importance have got to be unyielding in their demand. I submit to you that the urban league of Greater Miami, through which we rise village concept, is going to be unyielding. We will not allow any parent engagement conversation not to give priority to engaging our parents. And we will not allow the formula for engagement to be the traditional formula for engagement. We will allow the formula for engagement to come up from us and not down to us. And what we're going to be talking about may not be popular to some people. And how we propose to do it may not be acceptable to a lot of people. But I suggest to you that I think we have convinced everybody who knows us that We Rise is not concerned about making friends, it's concerned about making progress. I think we have made it very clear to those who know us that we're not dealing with a plan for quote unquote self-aggrandizement and agency promotion. I think everybody who knows us knows that we are on this agenda because we believe that at the end of the day, our future lies in our ability to become educated. I think we all know that we have always concluded that it ain't about racism, it's about being selfish. I think we've made it very clear that in our community, it's about us making it very clear to those who are in power that we are not anti-anybody, but we're simply unabated pro-advocates for a quality future for the children of the city. I think it ought to be very clear to everybody that We Rise is not about self-aggrandizement of the agency. It's not a program for us. It's a process for us. It's not about lifting us up. It's not about making us important. It's about making sure that the future of the children that we say that we're concerned about becomes the number one priority for this community. So I'm saying to you that as we get ready to continue to be involved in this electioneering process, as we come down to the wire, where we're going out to vote, as we take advantage of what we did in 1963 with the passage of the 1993 Voters' Rights Act, that people clearly understand that it's about us being selfish. That we understand clearly the power of the ballot. And that we will not vote for people just because they tell us to vote for people. I hope that nobody that is listening to this podcast, and I hope that nobody who votes who is of my pigmentation simply votes because they got a note from somebody saying, go vote for Joe. And that's all they told you about Joe was his name and his punch number. And I hope that nobody who participates in this early electioneering process and will finally vote on election day votes because they just simply were told that Johnny Jones was a good person and he's a Democrat or she's a Republican and that we ought to vote for them. And I hope that nobody really votes because they believe that if they don't vote, things are going to get worse. And if they do vote, somebody has convinced them that they're going to get better. Oh, there's no evidence that proves that. But what we do know as we watch what's going on right now in the American political process, that because there is so much individual power by those that we elect, that they will do whatever they have got to do to convince us to elect them or re-elect them. So I hope that as we prepare to participate on this election day, that we will vote with a conscience, that we would say to those who are running for public office, I'm voting for you because you have said on the record that this is what you're going to do. And this item is important to me. Just to vote for the sake of voting because it's an American right. We got the American right. Vote intelligently. Vote with a passion. Vote because you want change. And if you don't get the change, then vote the next time to get those out of office who said that they were going to give us change. We ought to stop allowing people who look like us to run and get elected by us because of their ability to articulate the nature of our misery index. That the white folks are doing this and the Cubans are doing that and now the Haitians are doing this. But if you elect me, we are going to do this. And then they don't do one damn thing. And we know that, but we don't say anything. Well, on the second Saturday, starting September the 10th, from 10 to 12, at Mount Calvary Baptist Church, on 11th Avenue and 62nd Street, Northwest. We're going to start a process that's going to change that. There's going to be a new big button right on this hat, which will say, we control our destiny. We rise. We put you in, we take you out. If you don't do what we want you to do, we don't care what color, what church you attend. We don't care your sexuality. We don't care about any of those things. All we care about is whether or not you're prepared to do what you said that you were going to do when we put you in. And if you don't do it, we're not going to say, well, you know, your brother has the right, sister has the right. No, well, you know, they're nice. No. The institutions that determine the quality of our future are controlled by political decisions. And therefore, we have to make sure that those institutions do what they're supposed to do in our own selfish interest. And if we're not prepared to do that, then why do we keep talking about institutionalized racism? Why do we keep blaming somebody else? Why do we expect others to do for us when we don't care enough or don't give it enough of concern to do it for ourselves? Why should we do that? We do that because politicians who run for elected office have found out that all they got to do is remind us of our past. All they got to do is talk about racism. All they got to do is talk about somebody else is doing something to you. All they got to do is emotionally exploit your quote unquote expectations of the system and convince you that they, if elected, would change them. That shouldn't happen. It's our fault. It's our fault that last evening, Dade County School Board had a 3-hour meeting from 5 to 8 to talk about parental engagement via Zoom. One meeting, 3 hours, via Zoom for parental engagement, as if parents were so excited about being engaged that they certainly were going to tune in and participate. Haven't seen the numbers yet. If they had 100 parents, I'm going to be surprised. They may have. But I can say to you that my community was not engaged at all. The announcement was made. It was promoted. But my community was not engaged. I can say to you they were not engaged because those who looked like them were not out beating the drums, saying to the parents, tune in, we're going to talk about parent engagement, making sure that the parents that they say that they serve were aware of the fact that this was going to happen, saying to those who wanted to be involved in parental engagement that this is not the only way, this is one of the ways that parental engagement can be a one-day activity. It has to be a several days activity. The school is starting tomorrow, and therefore to talk about parental engagement the day before school starts, you ain't serious. You're really not serious. You just check the box. And then you move on. I don't blame the system once again, but I do blame us for allowing the system to continue to treat us in a bastardly way. And then we just move on to the next item. And the next item now is school is back in order. Nobody can tell me how many new principals are going to be in the village. Nobody can tell me how many children who are supposed to be coming to school are not going to be coming to school because they have gone elsewhere. I was at KIP, new headquarters. Never seen so many children from my village whose parents now have pulled them out and taken them to the Miami-Dade Junior College North Campus of KIP in search for a better quality of education. So you can talk about being an A district all you want to, but there are a lot of folks who don't believe that you is an A district, and that's why they're leaving, going elsewhere. How many children who live in my village now have gone elsewhere? And what will that under-enrollment do to the quality of instruction that's going to be in my village? Who are going to be the new leaders, the new principals in my village? And were they selected simply because of the fact that there was a vacancy? Or is there an analysis of the circumstances and the factors that need to be addressed in that particular school? And have we identified principals who have the background, the personality, and the ingenuity that's necessary to take those schools to where we ought to have them at this moment in our history? Do we go about business as usual, going back out of the pandemic? Or do we care enough to say that this is the beginning of a new beginning? And are we willing to do what we've got to do in order to make sure that the children that we are responsible for, in spite of circumstances beyond our control, will succeed on our watch? And if they don't, it won't be because we didn't have a plan to make it happen. And we are prepared to do whatever we've got to do to make sure that this pandemic does not extend beyond 2022. That there are no new problems that we have not been able to discern. They're just an expansion of the old problems before the pandemic. That vacancies are not new in Liberty City, but the number of vacancies are going to be new in Liberty City. The underperformance is not new in Liberty City, but the number of underperforming students is going to be off the Richter scale, because underperformance now is new to this A district. So we've got a real challenge. And that's why I was so disappointed last evening when the announcement was made that from 5 to 8, we will be discussing parental engagement as we get ready for the 22-23 school year. And that's why I was really disappointed that they talked about everything extensively except how, who, when, and why as it relates to parental engagement of parents in general and some parents specifically. Can't blame anybody but ourselves. We can't say that we didn't have representation before the meeting. We can't say that we didn't have an opportunity to participate in the dialogue and the conversation during the meeting. But one of the things that was really, really telling last night is that I saw no Black parents at the meeting. And I can only conclude that none were there because those who represent them did not insist that they be there. I can only conclude that they simply knew that it was going to be a charade. And since it was going to be a charade, why invite them? Or maybe they don't have the kind of penetration into their constituency base that allows them to pick up the phone and say, we're going to have this school board meeting and I need you to come down and testify. I do know when I challenged the selection process for the sitting superintendent that they did call pastors who came down to say that the process was all right. And I know that they were called by them because I said, what are you doing down here? Why did you call me so I could fill you in on why we were anti the process? But they came because the colored school board members called them and they felt obligated and obliged to respond. We gotta stop that foolishness. Gotta stop those things. This stuff is not personal, but it is about the future of our community. And it doesn't matter to me about party affiliation. It doesn't matter with me about body pigmentation. I'm concerned about making sure that we as a community challenge all of those who purport to represent us, and that if they don't want to do it, then get out of the kitchen. And I say to you that nobody should be held in a position of high esteem simply because they look like me. I expect more of you, and when I don't get it, then I will treat you like I treat anybody else. So put on your calendar, once again, the second Saturday in each month, starting September the 10th, from 10 to 12 at Mount Calvary Baptist Church, 11th Avenue and 62nd Street Northwest. We're going to have a conversation continuously about what we have to do in order to make sure that coming out of this pandemic, returning back to school, our children have a chance to catch up, to catch up, to catch up. And that those who are in charge, it starts first with us as parents, as concerned adults in the village, to make sure that everybody acts out and conducts their role accordingly as it relates to the catch-up plan. That we will decide what we've got to do, and will also articulate what we expect others to do who are our partners, in making sure that we ensure a quality future for our children. And that we will hold ourselves accountable, and that we will hold all others who touch our children accountable. And that when we have parents who don't do what they're supposed to do, we will condemn that behavior. And when we have elected officials who promise to do things and don't do them, then we will put them out. It ain't personal. It's about what we think we have to do in order to be responsible adults. So I hope I can look forward to your being with me. And as you think about voting, vote, vote, vote. If you just want to vote because they say vote, then vote. If you want to vote because somebody said if you go vote, you'll be a good citizen, then be a good citizen. Take the palm card, go punch the number, and you're a good citizen. If you're going to vote, or if you're telling them to vote because somebody says that if you are convincing people to vote, I can pay you, and take the money, run with it. Just don't let me know that you got it. But if you understand the awesome power that you have when you use the vote selfishly to change the quality of life of the present, to make sure that the future is equal in terms of opportunity for all, and be wise, be aggressive. And when you witness what I witnessed last evening, don't just throw up your hands. Be dogmatic and say, I'm going to do something about that. That should have happened last night. It did happen. And I'm dogmatic. So I hope that we can expect you to be with us. If you need more information, give me a call. Enjoy being with you. And what I want to do going forward is the next year, I'm going to have a big badge on the front of this hat, which says, we rise in 2022, coming out of the pandemic. We slew those who did not rise with us. God bless you. See you next week.
About most of our lives, but we've made it still standing 'cause they can't destroy what's inside. Black people keep going.